probably seen this map before, but just to go over it again, we've got 8,000 proposed new homes. Just in this area, we have 8,000 already entitled lots. So developers could go out, pull permits on those today and start building. So that's, and then we've got over 12,000 approved in South Folsom here. So traffic on Highway 50, which is already bad, you can imagine which direction it's going. Kind of major projects, well, Dixon, you can see lots of homes coming. Kind of the realities of housing in the West County, our housing element, which is one of the few items that the state requires us to do as a county, was certified in 2013. And it says in there that we have excess housing in all of the income categories. So we have excess low-cost housing, excess moderate housing, and excess above moderate housing. We still have 15,000 lots which are entitled throughout the county. I meant 8,000 of them about in El Dorado Hills. We don't need any more housing. And then all these projects coming up, Central EDH, Dixon Ranch, etc. These are all discretionary. They're not part of the general plan. They don't need to be built. The developers have no right to build them. They have the right to ask to build them, but they don't have the right to actually build them. On the waterfront, this is a really complicated issue, so I'm just going to touch on it a little bit. The EID board is very friendly to Parker Development and other developers. Dale Coco, George Osborne, and Bill George in particular, those three seem to vote for the developers every time. In spite of Dale Coco running on exactly the opposite platform. Alan Day and Greg Preda seem to be the only ones that are voting for us, the residents here. EID claims there's enough water to build out the general plan as it's spec'd out. But there's not enough water for all these general plan amendment projects that I just showed you, Marble Valley, Central EDH, etc. But the funny thing is that EID hands out water meters on a first come, first served basis. So if Dixon Ranch comes in and gets approved and they are first to the draw, they'll get all these water meters. Well, then EID's out of water, so you have to go back and get more water rights, build more water infrastructure, et cetera, to deliver all this stuff. Well, guess who pays for all that new infrastructure? We do. In the meantime, I mentioned the farmers. These ag rates are, their water is a marginal cost at 1/17 of what the residential users pay. And it's the same water. It's treated, it's chlorinated, it's piped, it's drinkable, but they pay 1/17 of what you do. So there are all kinds of strategies to try to fight these developments. You'll have your own strategies with your group. That's, we're not really talking about those tonight. We're going to focus mainly on the CEQA issue here. But in terms of political elections, recalls, lobbying commissioners and supervisors, robocalls. You've already been doing a lot of reaching out on social media. That's great. Advisory vote, Measure E, that's great. I don't know if the supervisors are going to listen to that or not. It's interesting. So on the legal front, and I really think you need to approach both of these in parallel, because it may turn out that all of these efforts fail, and then you're left with this as your only recourse. And really, it's important to hire some legal counsel pretty early on in the process. A big part of the task here, and what you would be working on, is building what's called the administrative record. And so this means you need to comment on everything you can find in the draft EIR that's an issue, and we'll get into more detail on that. You need to write letters to the supervisors and the planning commissioners. You need to dig up supporting documents that show evidence that your case has some merit. And all of this stuff needs to go in the public record. At some point, you'll have to submit it to the county, and they will have to put it in their document system called Legistar. one of the important items here too is you have to kind of show that you've exhausted your administrative remedies. And you've attended all these meetings, you've written letters, you've yelled at the supervisors, you've commented, you've tried to show they were wrong, and that all has to be part of the record. That way the judge can say, okay, these guys really did try. They're not just here after the fact whining about it. What is CEQA? California Environmental Quality Act. I think, Wayne, you were in on the early days of that. The purpose is really to kind of uncover possible environmental impacts of projects, inform the public, and either avoid or mitigate the impacts if possible. And it's supposed to look at all these different areas here in the EIR. One thing that's important to realize is it doesn't cover economic impact. So if you, okay, so this is kind of a little bit of complicated flow chart of how the CEQA process works. But a project comes in and the staff makes some determination, oh, it could be this project is exempt from CEQA. Boom, it goes to the end. Or if it's not, then they have to prepare this initial study, and if they find that there aren't any big significant impacts, then they can do what's called a negative declaration. And they may have to have some mitigations along with that, and generated 300 some pages of comments on the draft EIR. So some of the harsh realities of CEQA. Environmental consulting is big business. We know personally several environmental consultants. And the way they operate is the client comes to them and says, this is the answer we want. Now write us an EIR that supports the answer that we want. And so they'll leave out pieces, they'll, try to downplay some of the impacts, understate them. And so, yes, it is a big issue, but I don't know. A conflict of interest is a different lawsuit, right? That one probably is hard to prove, and that's a different kind of trial and a different kind of suit. If you do your job right, you should be able to uncover in your comments that, oh, they didn't analyze this, they didn't analyze that, they didn't give the impact of this. And so regardless of whether it was a conflict of interest or not, you at least have spelled out what the problems are with the EIR. Public noticing, they only have to notice people within 1,000 feet of most projects, and they only have to put a tiny little ad in the classified section of the Mountain Democrat, or it doesn't complete it, but it fills in the legislative or administrative record. You probably will uncover quite a few things that they didn't analyze, things that need to be analyzed more. The final EIR will be a better document, and most importantly, it sets the groundwork for legal challenge. Very common tactics that they'll use, you need to watch out for these. They'll frequently make an assertion, this doesn't impact traffic. Well,
what do you mean?
where is the evidence for this? Okay, so you'll have to, and the next slide gets into how you have to phrase questions so that they have to answer them. These unsupported assertions or conclusions, make sure they provide the evidence that backs up. That has to be, you are reading a 600-page lie. Okay.
Exactly.
Your job is to take this lie apart, dismantle it, and document, make them provide real answers and real data. There frequently will have impacts that are not analyzed. For instance, in the general plan update, they said, we don't have to analyze the noise impact because none of the policies changed noise. Well, we came up with several pages of new policies that all had impacts on noise. So in the final EIR, they begrudgingly went back and answered those questions, though not very well. So, again, this was another assertion, oh, we don't have to analyze noise because nothing here impacts. This is another one, incorrect project description that you'll see fairly often where that it will be changing over time. For instance, they'll have, in the draft EIR, it'll be one project description, but in the final EIR, they've tweaked the description a little bit to make it sound not quite as bad in some areas. Do you have a specific example? Important. This is also very important. Frequently, they're supposed to analyze reasonable alternatives to the project. And usually what they do is they pick these alternatives that clearly are bogus to start with. You know, why would you ever propose this as an alternative? And so of course they do all the study and say, oh, it's not feasible. Well, of course. So what you need to do is if you can think of a reasonable alternative, then you suggest it and you ask them to study it.
Right. And I think that
So mitigation measures that aren't effective. You'll see this all the time in here where you just mentioned that one.
Right.
Oh, we're gonna mitigate this by, you know, daily having somebody mop the floor and,
Right.
you know, whatever. Well, no, you aren't. You know, and I'll talk more about mitigation measures, but you know, if you find a mitigation measure you think is not sufficient, you need to call them out on that and the cumulative impact of a project. And that means not only do you analyze the impact of the project you're looking at, but all the impact, you have to add that to the impact of all the projects that you know about. And they very often fail to do that. And
Right.
it's, for instance, the 12,000 homes in Folsom, they actually have to include the impact of those in, you know, the cumulative impact analysis, because those 12,000 homes have a huge impact on traffic on Highway 50. Well, you know, so you add all these other developments that they know are already approved, all the ones that have been proposed, plus this one.
So that's something to look for in your EIR.
Right.
What have they included
What-
in the cumulative impacts?
And what are those 12,000 homes called? Does it have a development name or?
South of 50,
What is it?
South Folsom.
Okay,
Yeah.
South Folsom.
South 10,800.
And you really have to nail them down on this because when,
Thank you.
on the town center mitigated neg deck, I asked a question. Please list the developments that you used to analyze the cumulative impact. Well, Roger Trout came back and said, we used all the
All
appropriate
the appropriate.
ones.
right, we hand selected the ones that were appropriate, and we used those.
It's like, what were they?
Yeah, and see, since that was a mitigated neg deck, they don't have to give you a detailed answer. In an EIR, they have to give you a detail. So
Yeah.
Right.
on here, I said, please list the specific developments, and I gave all the examples, Marble Valley, Lime Rock, blah, 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 blah. And so they eventually came back, but they still were not straight on the answer.
Fudged.
Yeah.
Oh, it was.
And so he's always said to us, and when you're looking at this stuff, don't get lost in every single detail. What the judges are looking for is blood on the floor, as he puts it.
Right.
And so who is going to be damaged, either physically or economically damaged as a result of passing this project? And so traffic, you know, that's a good one. Air quality, asbestos,
Water,
water,
Oh, yeah.
but water's a tough one.
it is a tough one.
Well, if they bury hazardous waste under that road.
It's tough because of EID and their dishonesty too, but
It's on the floor, that's what judges are looking for. They want to actually see,
Who's hurt?
really, yeah, people who will be damaged by this, not just some theoretical problem that might be created by it. Comments, you know, we talked a little bit about this. Comments like, I don't like the project, or this is
That's
too
what I
many,
do.
too many houses, or whatever.
Yeah.
No, sorry, in the EIR, you know, that might be a good argument for the planning commission or for the board, but no, in the EIR, they'll just say comment noted and go to the next one. But questions or requests that you submit on the draft EIR actually have to be, they require a response by law. And the responses have to be in a similar level of detail as the question. So if you ask a very simple question, they can give us a very simple answer. If you ask a very detailed 4-paragraph question, they kind of have to give a very detailed 4-paragraph answer. If you're reading the EIR and you don't understand something, ask for clarification. And on these, you know, I forgot to put in here, give the citation, so it's page number, paragraph. And usually what you can do is just, you can quote, cut and paste the little, you know, the line or the paragraph out of the EIR in your document. Page 473, paragraph 2.
here it is, right?
Says this, I don't understand what you mean by such and such, please explain. And again, you have to say, you know, please show, please provide, please analyze, please explain. If you don't ask for an action, they won't do it.
That's a great point.
Something that
But
On children. You
Right.
have to say the effect on
Children's
health or children's
Oh,
respiratory
man.
health or
your job to make that document understandable to you. So asking for clarification wherever and whenever, do it all the time.
Okay.
It is totally
Right.
good. If you read it, don't say, oh, I don't know what that is, I don't know what to say about it. It's like, okay, I don't know what to say, I don't understand this.
initially.
And if you don't.
And so, because when the judge is reading, looking at all this stuff, if you're seen as the adults saying, being polite and all this stuff,
Right.
and the county comes back, in fact, they gave us some very dismissive and rude answers in some of these, you know. And so, you know, Your Honor, I was just asking this question and look at this answer.
That plays in your favor, right?
So, okay, next. Let's see, we talked a little bit about
Alternatives.
alternatives. I don't know that we need to go any more on that one. Impacts, typically they'll categorize impacts in the EIR as not significant, significant, but insignificant and unavoidable. And
air quality, they said it's unavoidable.
so.
Yeah, unavoidable or not significant, those two, that's it.
Right, and so
Yeah.
most of the time
That's
they're
not
relying on these also. You know, these impacts are very subjective, of course, also, right? And the way to try to nail them down on this is to be quantitative, you know, please provide me with the number of, you know, car trips per day that, you know, or the
Very
amount
good.
of particulate matter that is, you know, created by this, you know, so you
And the
Try-
source.
and try to nail them down to specifics because a lot of times they really waffle on that. If you think it's wrong, you know, the best thing is if you can gather some evidence from papers, articles, other EIRs, that kind of thing. It's very time consuming to do that. You may not have the time to do that. So even if you don't have the time to go do that, make sure you at least ask them to provide supporting evidence for their claim.
And you're gonna give us copies of these slides?
Yes.
Okay, got it.
And make sure, you know, any articles and papers and such that you do use in writing your comments, make sure those get submitted along with your comments. They have to be part of this public record. Mitigations are another huge area. The project has to be
Great.
made in such a way that the mitigations have to be in place before the project. Because it doesn't do any good to say, oh, we'll come up with some mitigations once the project is done. No. They may not be able to mitigate it. So they have to have very clear mitigation steps. We ran into this in this document, general plan update. Self-enforcement is not a reasonable mitigation. So they have proposed that we're gonna allow all this loud music and everything, but don't worry, it won't get too loud because we're gonna have it self-enforced. Think of a better mitigation, propose that mitigation and ask them to evaluate that.
Oh, okay, good.
The county track record of mitigation enforcement is dismal.
We don't really do-
We have one code enforcement officer part-time for the entire county. You know, and again, if you can collect, we've always meant to do this, but we just didn't have time. Tom suggested, for instance, call Placer County, call Amador County, find out how many code enforcement officials they have and their population. We know we have one official here for 180,000 people. Okay, what's the ratio of code enforcement officers per capita? So any examples you have of enforcement, it would be great. Deferral of mitigation, CEQA only allows that when three things are done. Specific standard is set, such as, okay, we know we have to achieve 68 decibels, or we know that we have to be a level of service E, and that they provide the means of mitigating it and measuring it. And there's an actual commitment, and this is where our county always fails, is not
Right.
very important. In two regards. One is, again, when they make an assertion in the draft EIR, you ask them for the name of the document, the page number, the paragraph. They have to tell you exactly and include in, bibliography essentially where their assertion came from or their claim. And so they can't just say, Caltrans says such and such. No, they have to give you the actual document, the paragraph, the dates, enough to identify the document. And then in the reverse sense also, I mentioned this already, any document you rely on, make sure that we include, they will come out with the final EIR. And then you will have only a little bit of time before a planning commission hearing. It doesn't have to be a 10-day gap. The minimum it has to be available is 10 days. And that's what they did on Dixon Ranch. They put out final EIR commission meeting. So read through the answers they provide to your questions. And this is one thing that Tom had suggested, a kind of a spreadsheet, write up, how many of your questions did they not answer at all, which is very frequent. They just won't even answer the question. Or they give a vague answer or not in the expected detail. You wrote a long, detailed question and they blew you off essentially. We see this too, where you ask a question and they kind of answer a different question.
Right.
You ask this detailed question about the CIP and they say, the CIP is a wonderful mechanism for doing propaganda, assertions without evidence again. Their general plan, the way that they make numbers deceptive. So take Green Valley Road. Commuter traffic is usually heavy one direction in the morning and heavy the other direction in the evening. Well, what they did is they combined the numbers and averaged it and said, oh, Green Valley Road is level of service C because the capacity of this road is X cars. Well, really it's level of service F in the commute direction and level of service A in the non-commute direction. So that's one way they cheat. Traffic at intersections or interchanges. Well, Measure Y requires them to measure traffic at intersections and interchanges. In looking at the little chart, there were hundreds of these road segments that were supposedly analyzed. I noticed some of the key segments, like the segment underneath the overpass here, and a few other segments just were missing from the table. And when I asked for them, they didn't even respond to that. They just continued to not list those road segments. Again, we talked about them ignoring Caltrans data, asserting their measurements are more accurate. Well, Caltrans data, they have coils in the pavement that count the cars as they go by. Caltrans knows exactly how many cars are going by. So to claim that their measurements are, well, in fact, the county doesn't have a way to measure traffic on Highway 50. CIP projects are supposed to mitigate the impact of additional housing. The TIM fees, whenever a new house is built, transportation impact mitigation fee is paid. It's supposed to go toward these improvements in the roadway. But unfortunately, as we've seen, these improvements to the roadway get pushed out 10, 20 years.